from the Rebel Capitalist live event. What an outstanding, amazing thing to go to. Rebel Capitalist Live, George Gammon puts this thing on a couple of times a year. I've gone to the last three of them: Houston, Miami, and this one was in Orlando. And what an amazing thing to do, you know? The speakers there were just incredible. And I have to say, like, my favorite ones were Robert Barnes, which I tell you, his information was really the type of information that really gets you like wanting to dig into more, because he really gets focus in on like the global like leaders and how they are impacting, you know, everything. And I mean, I couldn't even begin to detail how vast his knowledge was in just the short amount of time they had this discussion panel, and it was quite incredible to listen to. So I definitely want to go back and get some more of that. Brent Johnson. Love the dollar milkshake theory. His presentation was absolutely killer. When you get into the live stream, hit the like button, because that's going to send the algorithm out there to get more views up in here. So thank you. We got 26 of you. Thank you for joining in. But Brent Johnson's milkshake theory was just absolutely killer. He did a great job with this, because what he did is he basically disproved the dollar milkshake theory first, right? He said that a lot of people are calling the dollar milkshake theory debunked and all this other stuff, and he says, you know, they might be right. And for like the first part of the presentation, he just basically annihilates the milkshake theory, and then comes back and just double downs and just really proves it all out that the dollar milkshake theory is really in play. And that was just really a lot of fun. He made it so easy to listen to. Jeff Snyder's was probably one of the most like, how do I say this? His information is unlike anybody else's. It doesn't, like, he talks when his presentation was so different from everybody's, in the way that he speaks. It was just incredible. And of course, you know, heavy hitter like Peter Schiff, like, I like the way they talked about it. You just wind him up and let him go, and that's really what his energy was like there too. I mean, he didn't have any notes or nothing. He just went out there and just started going for it. And so for an hour, he just rambled on about the economy. It was quite fun. But yeah, we got in Thursday evening, hung out for a little bit. On Friday, we did the cocktail party, which was a lot of fun. You know, there was I think about 500 people that showed up for the conference, and I don't know, there's quite a few hundred people at the cocktail party, I would say. And then yeah, I had the great speakers and just a wonderful good time. So. All right, how many we got up in here? 64. Awesome. Hey, Jaws, right on. Signed in and liked under both my accounts. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Yeah, definitely hit the like button. We'll get the algorithm out there and get more people up in here. I want to thank George, not George Gammon, but George, a gentleman who emailed me. Totally different George. And he asked me if I ever done a video on the average inflation target rate that the Federal Reserve has announced for their new monetary policy. And I thought this was kind of funny, because yeah, this was actually, I've been talking about average inflation rate almost since the beginning of this channel. I had covered this speech. It is this one right here: Monetary Policy Strategies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World. And I'll leave a link for it down in the description. And in this speech, if you read it and think about some of the things that he says in this speech, and then think about what's happened, it totally, like, he says, I'm sorry, I guess I should continue. George asked if I feel that the Federal Reserve wanted this inflation to take place. Yes, I do. And it's because of this right here. Listen to what he says. Let me see. All right. This downward shift in inflation expectation has a second round effect on real interest rates and the economy. Or I'm sorry, real interest rates, the economy, and inflation. When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus, making the downturn worse and reducing inflation even more. Even in times when policy is not constrained, the expectation of below target inflation in the future affects future affects current decision, putting additional downward pressure on inflation. In other words, monetary policy is always swimming upstream, fighting a current of too low inflation expectations that interferes with achieving the target inflation rate. So there's two things going on there. You got the inflation rate, right? The official inflation rate they put on the whatever, the number that you see in the, that they give you. And then there is the inflation expectation, right? Which is different. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, well, what's the difference in it? Because inflation expectation actually causes inflation, right? The inflation expectation is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you have a low inflation expectation, then the chances of you going out there and spending your money to try and, get ahead of inflation isn't going to happen. But that's not really the important part. What the important part is the part where he says the downward shift in inflation expectation has the, okay, hold on, let me get through it. When policy is constrained by the effective lower bound, the downward shift in inflation expectation raises the real interest rates. Okay, that's the important part to try and understand, because this is where the inflation expectation really starts to affect the real interest rates. If you are an investor who gets a 2% return and you have an inflation expectation of 1%, the real return, the real interest rate is 1%. If you can lower the inflation expectation, you will raise the real interest rates to 2%. What the investor anticipates on getting as a return. So you see where, like, if you can lower the inflation expectation, you can raise the real interest rates. Something I found very interesting coming out of, because when I was reading this, it was shortly after that Donald Trump was screaming, there's no inflation, the Fed should be printing money, lowering the inflation expectation and raising the real interest rates. Now, why would you want the opposite of that, right? Because if you raise the inflation expectation, right? Because what does he says? Gosh, gee whiz, I should have brought my glasses out here. Sorry, guys. Okay. Raises the real interest rates, further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus. Right? How does this further diminishing the degree of monetary stimulus? This is a pretty interesting question to think about, because if you think, like, if you have low inflation expectation, that would somehow be stimulating to the economy, right? But if you raise the inflation expectation and you have low interest rates, like we have when everybody was anticipating, hyperinflation and mortgages were at 3%. Right? You could borrow money at 3% and expect it and anticipate that you're going to be having a 7% inflation in the future. You just gain 4% on your money, right? You're buying 4% purchasing power by that, by spending your money now instead of into the future at 3%, instead of losing your purchasing power to 7 in the future. That's a 4% difference. So you see how that the degree of monetary stimulus gets you out there trying to buy these houses and everything else. When the interest rates are low and the inflation expectation is high, it increases the stimulus. It gets you out there moving. And that's what that's one of the things that I tried to explain back when it was happening during the time. And everybody just, was just like kind of throwing it out the door. But now it makes sense, right? Because we're starting to see the inflation start to come down, and we're starting to see this talk about average inflation coming up. In this speech, right, he talks about a couple of ways to solve the problem. Now, the second option, right, because he has the first option, and I'll go over that, but I want to go over the second option because it's more important. The second option is average inflation targeting, whereby the central bank purposefully aims to achieve an above target inflation rate in good times, when a lower bound is not constrained, is not a constraint. Properly designed and implemented, such an overshoot can offset the inflation undershoot during bad times, so that the longer run average inflation rate and inflation expectations are in line with the target. So what they are saying right there, right, that they're going to let the inflation run extra hot, extra long for an extended period of time. I mean, I said it so many times in these videos. I said it over and over and over again. And then on the same note is that once the inflation comes down, they're going to leave interest rates elevated for an extended period of time, so that they can make up for the fact that they are going for this 2% average inflation rate over time, which we don't know what it is. It's like, arbitrary to the Fed. I'll leave links down in the description. You can go and research it. Even like the mathematical equations that I see coming from the Federal Reserve are so complicated that it makes me wonder if they even, like, I don't know, how do you solve these things? So it's funny when I see like some of these when I see some of these like economists coming out and saying, like they're going to go down to their 2% target, they're going to, once they hit it, they're going to adjust interest rates. But that's not the case. Interest rates are going to stay elevated for a significant amount of time. And they say it, they tell us that too. I mean, they say it in the speeches, they say it all the time that, it's going to take, how do they put it, until the work is done, whatever that means. Okay. Thank you, Jaws, so much for the $1.99. Is $21 for a sheet of 4x8 half-inch plywood good price? Yeah, if you're getting, I mean, in my opinion, if you're getting a half-inch plywood CDX, even if it's a 4-ply, I mean, the 5-ply would definitely be a good deal, but if it's the 4-ply, I would say that's a good deal. And lumber prices came down. I haven't checked them today because I've been traveling. I just got back and hung out with the family for a little bit, and we got a roast on, so it's going to be done here in about an hour. So I thought I'd come out and just chat with you guys for a little bit. But I don't know, what are lumber prices today? Because honestly, I just don't see how retail prices are going to go much more than this, go down much more than this. I mean, they can, I mean, obviously prices can go very low, but right now we have so much mill curtailment taking place, and shorting, like, just a depletion of inventory, that I just don't really see where the prices could really deplete to the point that it's going to be. I mean, I don't know. I guess they could go under 200 per thousand, but I just don't think, like, 300 is going to be like where it's at. Other than that, I think mills are just going to shut down. All right. How good is your credit rating have to be to do what? All right. Well, your thoughts on gold and silver? Yeah. Well, after listening to some of the speakers like Mike Maloney and Peter Schiff, I tell you, there's very little doubt in my mind that holding on to gold and silver through this is going to be probably a very positive for you. I look at silver and gold as an insurance policy. I always have, and I always will. I dollar cost average into it as often as I can, but I don't really look at it as something that's going to protect me in any other way other than not having that third party risk. Like, it is my protection, my you know insurance for the time that if there was ever a situation where you can't get into a bank account or something, you have a tradable item. That's the way I feel about it personally. Now, the chances of it going up are quite dramatic. I mean, there is a lot of potential for gold and silver to make a move that is going to be quite extreme, especially if you think about it from a currency collapse kind of situation. Now, I personally do not think that the dollar will collapse with, like, on account of gold. Like, I think I see these two rising together, very much like Brent Johnson's milkshake theory. And really, I mean, it gets pretty deep when you start thinking about some of the things that are going on out there that really, leads you to believe that the dollar is going to be much stronger going into a crash than what anybody is really kind of understanding. Is that there's contracts out there. There is a lot of US dollar denominated debt. And it's not coming from the United States, and it's not coming from our corporations, and it's not coming from anything that has anything to do with us. But yet this dollar denominated debt exists out there in the world, and it gets used as currency. When that disappears, that is less currency out there in the system to use that's going to be strong for the dollar. At the same time, if people are trying to get out of their dollar denominated debt, they're going to have to try and get a hold of dollars to do it, which again is going to cause the dollar to strengthen. Now, this could go on for some time. It could go quite quick. I don't have no idea, like, to the extent of how big this shadow currency system really is. Once it goes, that is going to be trouble, right? Once the contracts are cleared out and everything, and people have their dollars and they don't want them anymore, like, they're done clearing out the contracts, they're not writing new ones, and they got to get rid of these dollars, they will come back to the United States. And the problem with that is that we just don't do any manufacturing here, or enough manufacturing to support our citizens, right? If we could export enough items to offset our trade imbalance, then yeah, okay, we might be able to, do something about that. But that's not the way it's going to go down. We just don't manufacture enough here, and the only thing we really export to bring in the new money is our debt, U.S. treasuries. And that's really, if that ends, our way of life and our standard of living will end, like, pretty much immediately. It'll be very, very ugly. So how close are we to that kind of thing? A long ways. Like, it is way out there. Like there's nothing that even remotely comes close to doing what the dollar is doing. Even if another currency was wanting to do it, let's say they're gonna like let's do it. We're at BRICS. Let's make it happen. There's two things you need to do in order to take over the dollar. One, you have to have you have to have a debt market as big as the U.S. Treasuries. And there's no other country that's even remotely coming close to doing what the United States is willing to do as far as going into debt, right? Because that's your export. That is those U.S. Treasuries. That is the United States export, and then people give us their hard-earned money for it, right? That's essentially what's going on, and we buy their stuff, right? So when that whole system ends, and or not, I'm sorry, when the Chinese take that whole system from us, right? That's the idea behind it. Then we won't have it, right? It'll be like no manufacturing, no debt, no debt to sell. There's nothing left, right? So then we would just be left up to the industriousness of the people, and most likely we'll be like being attacked at the same time because we won't have any kind of means of like actually fending for ourselves, except for the military that will, be used up pretty quickly, considering that we won't have any way of paying for it and nobody will be willing to lend us any more money for it to happen. Okay, so that was me kind of going off little conspiracy theories type stuff. It wasn't actually a conspiracy, none of that was. But that's really how I see it going down. So if we were to go to like a gold and silver standard, that would be terrible for the United States. It would immediately send us into poverty because we don't have enough gold and silver to survive for very long, right? Think about how much gold and silver we would have to export in order to bring in the imports that we have to do it. We would like export our gold immediately. It would be gone. So we can't go back to a gold standard. There's no way of doing it. And if we wanted to, then we would have to basically work incredibly hard, buy absolutely zero luxuries, use up everything you can, reuse, like never, not a new thing ever again, nothing luxury, only the bare necessities. And you do that for a couple of generations, like hardcore, like just hard depression type feeling for a couple of generations, and you might be able to like, why not? Maybe, pay off the debts and do all that other stuff. Sure. Yeah, I mean, a couple of generations of depression. Sure, you could save the system, right? There's no way. There's no way of it happening. All right, moving on. Man, coffee in the afternoon. Let's do it. Okay. Believe in Jesus Christ now or pay later. What is it? The armchair preacher. Don't you think wizards can keep it going? No. I don't. I mean, there's never, no, because every single society in history collapses the same way. First they're industrious, they do really well, they get all these, great exports that they, manufacture all these great things, export it out to the world, and then eventually the people start diving into luxuries because they get all this new money in, right? As soon as you get the new money, you work hard, right? You think about any household, any county, any country, any state, anything. Think about Chicago, right? You manufacture a bunch of cars, you bring in new money from all these manufactured cars, everybody has these great new jobs, and they're buying houses and raising kids and just having a great time, going to the restaurants and enjoying everything that comes from selling new cars, right? And being part of this manufacturing process that's going on there as you're exporting the manufactured goods and bringing in the cash. Well, once the manufactured goods stop coming in, you're done, right? It's all over. So, I don't know. Or Detroit, that's what I meant to say. So, anyway, going on. Hey, right on, composite operator. Thank you for the 11. Now, news. Oh, there we go. News came out Friday about wheat. The farmers in the U.S. expected to harvest 67%. The supply that came from Ukraine is about to finish. Food is about to become very expensive. And I know, and thank you very much for that. I appreciate the support, guys. That's the thing. I mean, people kind of throw this idea that there's not going to be a food shortage out there. I don't understand that. Like, there's only three things that make wealth. Okay, that's it. Food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. Right? Food, conveniences, and pleasures of life. So who cares about conveniences? Food. Right? That's part of wealth. And here's the thing. It's about consumables. Right? Wealth is not. If you had two suitcases full of money, 2 suitcases full of $100 bills, you're wealthy, right? You got all this money in the world, but if you can't buy anything with it, right? How wealthy are you really, right? If you can consume, right? Then, and it's food, right? Consume food, you got wealth. So it doesn't really matter if you have the money, right? I mean, the money, if you have the money right now, yeah, you can, like, you consider yourself wealthy because you can consume all this food with it, right? But if you can't consume the food with that money, then you're not wealthy. And that's something to think about, because really, wealth is not what a lot of people seem to think it is, right? I mean, believe me, I hung out with some pretty wealthy people this weekend. I mean, it's a lot of fun. These guys are so generous. They're so awesome. They're so, like, just enthusiastic and helpful and, like, encouraging too. And that's, like, what I love best about hanging out with the rebel capitalist guys, is that they're just so encouraging. It's like, hey man, what do you need help in? What are you looking to work on? What kind of, direction are you headed? What's the next step, and that's really where, I mean, going to these conferences has got me fired up, because that's what I really need to do. Is I need to take the next step with this channel. I can't just keep sitting in my car making videos. I got to really get out there and do something. And so anyway, wealth, right? What is wealth? Wealth is the food, conveniences, pleasures of life. It's not about the money. It's about the ability to consume. And think about that. If you can't consume the food, and the food is distant, or it's so expensive, then it doesn't, you're not wealthy. All right. That's the problem. And that's where it's going to come down to, when the rest of the world starts to suffer from the fact that they were not able to produce their own food, and the food that they normally get from these other distant off places are not producing it because of all the crap that's going on in Ukraine. Things like the damn elevator, that conveyor belt that crashed over there in Portland, carrying potash around the world. I mean, it's people were like, oh no, there's all this other potash that can be used. They'll just redirect the potash to different ports and stuff. Yeah, I know. I mean, that's cool. But you realize that this was like 7 million tons of potash. You're going to direct that over to two others and not flood them with potash? I mean, you think about it, they process as much as they can, right? And yeah, they can direct it over there so they have a place to outlet to go, but they're not processing as much as they're up to capacity. That's what you do. And so just by saying, hey, you can still go to these other places and export this product, yeah, that's true, you can, but it's not going to go out in the same efficiency that it had when the other 7 million tons were coming out of, like, one of I think it was one of the biggest export locations was off of that conveyor belt. So things like these, they pile up, and you are going to definitely see an impact happen. Now, here's the thing about it, is that although I say it's a food crisis coming, it's going to be in the, like, commodities like wheat or something like that, something that's really drastic that just ends up, like, really impacting the whole globe. But we see it happen all the time. We see it in eggs. We're seeing it in pork right now, where pork is, like, eggs shot up through the roof. Everybody said it was inflation, and pork is crashing right now, and everybody is saying, well, no big deal, right? But that is a big deal, because pork's about ready to get expensive again, since the investment into pork right now is tanking. And you can find this all over the place. It's bullwhip effect happening. I brought it up in lumber a long time ago and said this type of thing is going to happen throughout the rest of the economy, and we're really starting to see it play out now. All right. We have to force them to keep using the dollar some way. Somehow they can come up with some plan. No, they can't, right? I mean, if you can convince them, I mean, it's all about confidence, right? I mean, as long as you can still sell the treasuries and they'll sell you and they send you a bunch of stuff, then yeah, you got it. But the moment that they cut your credit off, think about your own household. I mean, if you were living on credit cards, right? And they cut your credit card off one day, and you're like, well, they'll figure it out somehow to give me some milk. I'll go down to the store and they'll just figure it out somehow, and they'll just give it to me. No, it doesn't work. They'd be like, yeah, go get some money, man. Go get some money. That's like, it's not somehow. There is a crash that is coming from. There is a change of events. Now, whether they can transition into Bitcoin and convince everybody to go into some commodity, and I'm not trying to say, like, trying to come up with some kind of weird conspiracy or some kind of off idea, but if they can come up with some kind of digital concept in which that they can continue to issue out debts, right? Then okay, fine. Maybe you can go generational debts, you can extend things out. I'm not saying you can't push the system longer and maybe even 100 years from now. So we don't even know. People could be like, dude, you were wrong. But then, I mean, 100 years from now, that's like the Keynesian plan. Everything is built for 100 years. And that's kind of how you see it happening. But it'll fail. I mean, eventually, think about it. We just don't manufacture anything. I mean, if you didn't produce anything, then why would anybody send you stuff? And the only reason why they send you stuff is because you're issuing out debt that they can buy that has a promise to pay, and then you have a military that'll defend the shipping channels. I appreciate seeing your journey. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys being here too. I mean, we've got 240 up in here. I'm going to be out here for at least another 30 minutes, and I'm going to go in and eat. Let's see here. Let me go back down. Sometimes I wish I was an adult in the early 90s. Print money and stimulus for America. Yeah, it's not, I mean, it doesn't work like that. I mean, you have to understand like how the Cantillon effect really works. Simon Black's presentation was really good. He talked about like how the Roman empires and went and conquered and built up and collapsed and everything, and so many things that he was talking about. I'm like, man, if we incorporated Cantillon effect into this presentation, it would be so rad. It would be so good because it was already just killer, but but if you could incorporate the Cantillon effect into it, like he even said, like, he was talking about, like, what was it, Alexander or something like that, who had, like, I forget who it was that he was saying conquering, because I don't know history very well, right? I only repeat from 1913 on. Okay. So anyway, talking about like this, Roman conqueror or Greek conqueror or whatever, and he had all these soldiers, right? And they went up like he had like I don't know like 10,000 soldiers or something, and they went up against like 600,000 of them, and he kills like 100,000 of these soldiers and loses like 400 of his men, right? And so he is just like he just conquers the whole land. They were like trying to deal with him afterwards. He's like, no, I beat you, man. I'm totally smoking you, and you're done. So he takes it, and like he was trying to give his generals like the reward, for conquering this thing. And he went to one of his generals, and he was just like, here, man, here's a bunch of gold for you to like carry out the rest of your life with. And he was like, oh man, this is like way too much. I can't handle this is too much. You got to keep some of this. And he was like, no, you don't understand who I am. See, this is an embarrassment if I don't give you this much. You have to take this much from me, because I'm the greatest guy in the world and I can conquer all kinds of stuff. So it was stated as a pride thing, but that's not the truth. What he was trying to do is he was trying to get the money to start circulating through the system again, because he was take this back home and start spending it back there as quickly as much as you possibly can, so that we can get some new money back into our system over there. Because why? Because we dove into luxuries, right? And that's the problem with it all. See, when you have an industrious nation that starts off like, being a manufacturing state, just like the United States was back in the, 50s, 60s, I mean, we were like, building the best stuff around the world, and everybody was sending us, we were exporting goods and they were sending us money, and our standard of living was increasing. See, this is another reason why the population is depleting. It's not because of anything else other than economics, all right? It's just what it comes down to. Everything is an economic event. I have come to that conclusion no matter what it is, and you can look at it as an economic event. And so as the new money was coming in from all this manufactured goods back in the 50s and 60s, and our standard of living increased, what do? We started buying luxuries, because you want to enjoy that new money that comes in. You want a nicer house, you want nice clothes, you want nice furniture, you want all the nicest stuff, right? And then as you do that, what you are ending up doing is not the spending of money, or it's not the printing of money and just injecting money into the system that's causing inflation. What it's doing is it's increasing consumption. It's increasing wealth, right? Because wealth is consuming, right? So it increases this wealth, and the consumption starts depriving the amount of consumable goods that are out there. And that is what causes inflation, right? Not necessarily the money, like, because you can print up all the money in the world. If it sits there in the bank, it doesn't do anything. You have to spend it, right? Spending money causes inflation. It's consumption that does it. And so now this consumption that starts to cause the inflation to go up, this is going to piss the people off, right? They're like, man, I don't want to buy higher price goods, right? I want to enjoy this new money at the same price that I got it at. So they start importing foreign production to compete with the domestic manufacturing, and that starts driving out jobs. And that's why you have so much homeless. That's how come you have all these problems going on, because the more you start driving in luxuries, because you're increasing the money supply through the issuance of debt, and you keep buying luxuries, and it keeps coming in from foreign production, and it keeps separating the rich from the poor. And pretty soon there's no jobs to manufacture, so you don't have good paying, high quality manufactured jobs. All you can do is just be a servant, right? Like, how can I help you? What can I do for you? What can I, because there's those, and then there's the people who actually have it, right? Two classes of people, the property owners and the inhabitants. It's another thing that Cantillon talks about. And I mean, I don't know why people would deny this. This is what's taking place here. And if you continue on with it, eventually that new money turns off and everybody's out and they all fall into poverty, right? And the only people who have anything are the people who actually held on to gold and silver or Bitcoin or something like that. But as far as saving the system, I don't see it. There's no saving the system. Like I said, unless you go through generations of like depression type, behavior while manufacturing and like working damn hard to manufacture as much as you can so that people actually around the world want to buy your stuff. And then you start paying off your debts. Right? Think about a household. Think if you're $100,000 in debt and you lost your job and you're like, you have to go get an apartment, right? Or maybe even live in your car for a while. This is the type of like behavior that the whole country would have to do on a whole. All right. Boy, I got a lot of comments here. Okay. Wealth also includes values of our opinions. These come from the heart. Yeah, that's true. Okay, sometimes I wish we already read that one. Okay, let's go down here a little ways. You guys, let's go down to where you guys are at. Okay. You can't compare gold to Bitcoin. They aren't on par. Okay, yeah, they are. Sure they are. Why not, right? I mean, one of them is a physical item that I can trade with you right here. The other one's a digital item that I can trade with somebody who's on the internet. Those two, outside of that characteristic of it, act exactly the same way. Right? I mean, other than those two, if you took those two pieces of it out, then you would have something that acts exactly the same way. Now, if I look at it as a currency in that, no, I'm sorry, if I look at it as a money in that sense, to me, it's exactly the same thing, right? They do exactly that, right? Now, if you want to compare the two, right, say which one's better, Bitcoin or gold? Okay, that's an easy one. Okay, Bitcoin cannot exist without gold. Gold can exist without Bitcoin. Gold wins. Right? So that's it. Like, I mean, but they're essentially the exact same thing. It's just one's digital and one's physical. But to understand what the money purpose behind it, they're exactly the same. There's no difference. Where do you see silver through the next decade? I really don't know. I mean, if I don't look at silver as where it's going to go. I look at silver as how many can you get. That's it. That's the only thing I care about, is how many ounces I can get. And this is what I want silver to do, right? So if I can create my future from my thoughts, I want silver to be $25 an ounce until I am 80 years old. And then I want it to be $1,200. Okay, so that's my prediction, and I'm going to manifest that now. So that gives you 34 years. Where do you say? Okay, we already did that one. No disagreeing. Had to tell good friend recently they've killed house purchasing and family formation via incentives of the system. Save living. Okay, they did this. No, this isn't they. This is it. This is an economic event that's happening, and they are merely a result of it in all the things that they do. That's all a symptom of the economic forces that are at play. That's what's really happening. If you take your mind off of the politics of it, because the politics are like the sideshow, like the big sideshow thing that's going on. The economic power, the forces that are happening, that's not political, man. You can't stop that stuff from happening. I mean, they try all the time. They do force and brute and all kinds of shit, and it doesn't work, right? I mean, it always falls apart. It always ends badly, but it's always the same thing that's taking place. It's the flow of money. It's the increase and decrease of money to a state. That's it. right? And when you kind of wrap your head around just that, like how does that happen? How does the increase of money happen, and how does the decrease happen? And whether or not it's from issuance of debt, or if it's like a gold standard, or if it's car manufacturing, or if it's a silver mine, or anything else, it's the issuance of new money coming into the system, and then what the people end up doing with that. That's the whole part of it. Like none of this, all this crazy, wild, stupid stuff that you see happening in the country is a result of an overwhelming consumer demand that took place, right? Because people started to riot. Now you look up what the definition of riot is when people started diving into in extreme luxuries with like belligerence to them, right? Think about how expensive cars got. Think about how expensive homes got. Think about all these things that everybody started diving into. It was luxuries, and then there was this huge separation between the rich and the poor. Again, I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, it is difficult to wrap your head around, but once you start seeing the pattern of it, it's the same over and over and over again. I mean, think about yourself. If you had a job where you were making $50,000 a year, and the next year you're making $60,000 a year, and the next year you're making $85,000 a year, and the next year you're making $120,000 a year, tell me what your spending habits would look like. I mean, just think about that for just a second. In 5 years, if your income did something silly like that, and what would your spending habits be like? You'd be like, man, I can buy whatever the hell I want. And I'm going to do whatever I want. And this is the attitude that a lot of people have when it happens so quickly. If you had to work damn hard for that money, you don't act that way. But when it's just boom, here you go, boom, here you go, you just turn into a nuthead, right? And it's like you just see it all the time. Anybody who ever wins the lottery loses it all because they just get stupid. And that's what happens when all of a sudden you have this influx of new money coming in, or if you're diving into extreme luxuries, or if it just gets to the point where you just have a mass pouring in of new money from whatever direction. I mean, think about it, even like in Holland, like, where they had the tulip mania, that was because they were the biggest shipping channel there was. All this new shipping or money coming in from shipping and transfer of goods and everything that happened in there. They had all this money, didn't know what to do with it. And they were like, oh, look at this. Tulips can go up to $1 million billion. They're like, oh yeah, here you go. I'll play that game. Cause yeah, these little tulips are worth it. I mean, no, of course not. It was a luxury item that they were getting into. And it was that dive into luxury that did it. And then eventually it failed when the new money turned off. All right, let me get back down. Geez, so many. Okay, cool. Thank you, Redazon, for the $4.99. All right, good evening, Yui. What's your thoughts on this software, America's hidden manufacturing advantage? Why do you think the U.S. makes the best software? Well, no, I do agree that the whole like tech industry and everything, but it's the trade imbalance, right? I mean, even if you were like say double down on tech or whatever and have all this this stuff that you can export as far as software and services like that, it's still like the trade imbalance that we have, the manufacturing that we do, the imported items that we get, and the exporting of our debt. That's the problem. Like, you can carry it on. Like, I'm not saying there's not industries that we can bring into the United States to say, hey, check this out, we got all these new jobs that are happening. Hey, that's cool. But it's just going to be, it's going to still happen. I mean, it's still eventually the new money is going to, it's going to pour in. More people will dive into luxuries, right? And it won't be sustaining. And eventually we'll have a bigger separation between the rich and the poor. The manufacturing of foreign goods will compete with whatever it is we're manufacturing here, or else we'll have to have incredible force coming from tariffs and subsidies or something like that, which is meaning that you're not operating in a free market, which is pure manipulation, which is an attempt to combat the market forces that are happening, right? I mean, it's just like they can try. I mean, it might work for a while, and people are like, "Aha, you're wrong. Look, it worked," and it'll be like, "Okay, well, we won't be here to see how these market forces eventually play out, because it is my opinion that it will eventually crash with a horrible, fiery wreck." Irresponsible is the problem, not luxuries or tulips. Well, okay, you're right. Because if we could either buy beers or saws, right? And everybody buys beer. Nobody buys saws. Like, some people buy saws, but not enough people buy saws. Right? And so the beer saws analogy, right? You get all this new money, and you can go out there and you can either consider the consumable items out there as either a beer or a saw. Right now, with the beer, you think about it. You got this manufactured good. There's a lot of agricultural products, transportation, advertising, all kinds of stuff within this beer. You consuming the beer, you got a lot of like things happen in there. There's a lot of money transferring hands. There's a lot of things going on. But eventually you drink the beer, there's no output from it, right? You're done. Now you got a hangover and you took out debt to pay for this beer. So now you have to work with a hangover to pay off this debt. Now, if you didn't buy the beer, instead you bought saws, right? So you took out a debt, you bought a saw. Unfortunately, you're going to have to work that saw for a while, and it doesn't feel like you're doing very good because you have to sell the items that you're cutting up and nailing together or gluing together, whatever you're using the saw to produce. But you sell enough of those produced goods, and eventually you pay off your debt. Now you can use that saw all day long. You can buy all the beer you want, right? And that's where America was back in the 50s, 60s. But eventually people were like, well, we manufacture a lot of good, and I like to drink a lot of beer. And pretty soon it was just like, yeah, this beer here that we're making, it's cheaper over there. Okay? And we're going to start using debt to buy foreign beer. And then we're going to get super drunk on foreign beer. And that's what we're doing right now, is getting drunk on foreign beer. Now, I think we just expanded that analogy a little bit. What will an economy with a negative birth rate look like? It'll look terrible. I mean, I don't know what a collapsing society is going to look like. I mean, a population. I mean, a collapsing population. I can't tell you how that's going to go down. Now, is it going to go for just a few years? Is there a way that all of a sudden people are encouraged and want to have kids like out of the blue? Like all of a sudden this whole concept of like not having kids is going to flip and everybody's going to have 4 or 5 kids? I don't think so. So the only way it's going to really happen to deal with the population is to immigrate, to bring people in from foreign lands. And that's the only way it's going to happen. Makes me eat it. I don't know. Like it's going to be difficult. If we're going to trade in silver and gold, by that time, everybody taking medications will be in serious trouble. We're not going back to a gold or silver standard. It just can't happen. I mean, it can't happen just from like, even if you were to open up Fort Knox and just say, okay, well, we're going to start buying all our imported items with gold. You'd empty Fort Knox. It'd be gone. It would just be like, okay, that's it. It's all gone. Now what? It was just like, because it would go fast. It would be so gone. And then you would have absolutely nothing. You would have no gold and no way of actually issuing out debt to pay for anything to come in. And then everybody here would just be flipping out and shooting each other, and it'd be chaos. Sometimes the neighbor thing can be good. Then I think sometimes having a neighbors would be great. Yeah. I don't know. Mike Maloney was talking about having a 900-acre plantation. I don't know what he's got, some mountain that he bought, and he's like way up in the middle of nowhere, and Lynette Zhang is way up in the middle of nowhere, and all these people that I talk to, they're getting away from their neighbors. But at the same time, they're also networking to try and encourage people to actually prepare for things to come. So it's not like they're running away. They're actually in the middle of it, trying to help. But man, you got to be prepared, and bugging out is not a bad plan. But I don't know where you would go. Like, I mean, these guys, I mean, they're setting themselves up. I mean, this is the thing that I found. When you get to a certain level in this life, in this accumulation of wealth, money, portfolio full of whatever it is you got, and pretty soon there's like the life is different, right? I mean, you think about it, you can get to a point where you like, there's no food, there's no medical, there's no anything that is really denied to you. Like you own, like not own, but you have a doctor. Like that's like, you're a billionaire. You can probably hire for your family full-time doctor that doesn't treat anybody but you and your family. All right? You see where I'm kind of getting at? Like you done separated yourself from the rest. Those are the property owners that Cantillon is talking about. Right? Those are the people. All the rest of us, we're just inhabitants. Even people who have millions of dollars, are just inhabitants, part of that bigger global elite club. You can get there. I mean, it's like, it's out there, it's possible, but still, even then, you're like, subject to them, whatever the hell that is. Yeah. Invest in Diabetic related things, kidney disease related stuff. Sad, but it seems that these will pay out well going forward. I think, honestly, I'm thinking, okay, where the money flow goes, right? So right now, if you were to invest in China back in the day, a long time ago, you probably would have done all right in a lot of those companies. But right now, China's peaking out, like with their manufacturing. Yeah, they're going to be a powerful manufacturer for a very long time, but they're done. Like they're peaking out, and manufacturing is now leaving China because of the Cantillon effect. Right? And now, when those companies leave, they're going to go finding their spots all around the globe, wherever it is that's cheaper manufacturing, that has the most industrious people who can build those products the cheapest and ship them out, and be profitable for them. Vietnam is like a great place. I'm looking like I don't know how to do this, but I'm thinking why not Vietnam? Vietnam's going to be the next manufacturer or a manufacturer of global producing goods, since a lot of these companies are leaving China and going to Vietnam. Same thing going down to Mexico. I mean, they're getting closer to the United States, which I don't know if is necessarily a good idea, but since the United States really isn't going to go anywhere, and neither is the dollar or the debt or anything else like that, getting closer to the United States for a while probably is a good thing. You're going to be able to get those goods to the United States easier, closer, because like you got to think transportation is part of the input cost of the goods, and if you can get it closer to the consumer, then that's like saving money basically. So even if you can manufacture it cheaper someplace else, just bringing it closer to the location can make it better. The only problem with that is the moment that transportation gets cheaper, because just like everything else, everything gets more efficient, like or over invested like we have right now with all these shipping containers. If the shipping gets cheaper, then even though you've like brought the manufacturing closer to home to try and get like maybe make up for that shorter distance, to make up for the extra price you're going to pay for manufacturing it closer, it's going to get eaten up when freight prices drop and you can just ship it from a foreign land, and the problem still continues. No matter what, I see the money always flows the same way. It's an increase and decrease of money to a state every single time. And as the increase starts to happen, politicians act a fool. People act a fool, right? But the moment it pops, everybody's mad and pissed, and they fight, and then they end up crashing until it's just like an absolute epitome, of like war and discuss, and then they start over again with new industries. Costco just built a huge distribution and cold storage here. Yeah, and it's like I said, guys. I mean, when I talk this way, it's not like it's happening. Like, I mean, it's happening, but how long can it continue? I mean, I honestly think that we're going to continue to dive into luxuries. I think we're going to have so many luxuries in this country. It's going to be unreal, because they're just like going to be a fat pig that's shoving us full of like, here, you got to take this stuff. You got to take all our manufactured goods since we bought all your U.S. debt, and so it's like just shove it all over to the United States, and we're going to be like just diving in it. And we're going to be like loving this stuff, and then one day it's going to all be over. So you think about like, it's funny because I don't know where it came from, but my wife, she knows a lot about the Bible. Like she grew up in the church and everything. And I was asking her about Sodom and Gomorrah. I was just like, what happened with these cities? What was going on? And so she talked about like the extreme rioting and the just the people's like misbehaviors, and like just treating it was like the separation of class. It was like, I forget how she was describing it, but it was like something about how like basically the people had turned on their fellow man, and it was like basically treating them terribly. And I kind of think about like how a lot of people treat the homeless, and how they act upon it and like won't help them, and just like give them a real hard time, and just like would rather spit on them than understand what the real problems are that are taking place there. That's the kind of thing that I think about when she was telling me. It was just like, yeah, this is the type of behavior when you end up diving into extreme luxuries. I was like, where were these two cities? I bet you they were right on a river, weren't they? They were right on some major port. And she was like, well, yeah, they were suspected to be wherever. And I don't know, because I'm not religious. So, but you all know about that story. And that's what I think about. It's just like, yeah, and then when this place burnt up, it was all built out of like the building materials that they used there at the time was like some kind of mixture of bitumen, right? And bitumen is like an oil, it's an oil product, right? That burns up. So like if a meteor exploded above there and it caught this place on fire, it would burn up like in a blazing hell, right? And so the whole story just totally plays out. And I'm like, man, this is what happens, right? It's just like you dive into these luxuries and you end up treating people like hell, because it's just like you have this, I'm better than, everybody else, and I know how to make this work. And then one day it's over, See, I think it was a lesson learned. It's just the same thing. No matter how you do it, nature will take care of business. It's a natural course of order. Personal responsibility will provide healthy benefits for the U.S. citizens and the rest of the world also. Okay, yeah. I understand. I understand responsibility, right? Like I understand that. I drive a '99 Toyota Corolla and a 2001 S10. Like I am responsible with the money. Like I don't want to just go out there and buy some expensive car, even though I could, and I would love to, because who wouldn't, right? But I understand this stuff, and I understand that there's a future out there that can be built that is so much greater than a new car. If you spent that money on a new car, you wouldn't have it, right? And that's what ends up happening. That's the responsibility that nobody sees, but nobody understands that. And nobody ever will. And you could take it back all the way to Greek, yeah, all the way back to, BC, whatever. The time that the moment that they had a currency, this started to take place, right? Money does this. This is what it does. It's because if you can gather up and acquire more than anybody else, you will separate yourself from them. It's just the way it goes. And if the possibility is there, it's going to happen. And then if you make the possibility really extreme because you can just print up as much money as you want, then guess what? You're going to have people who have so much damn wealth, it's going to be unheard of, right? It's like not even unheard of, but like so ungodly unbelievable, you wonder how it even happened. It's that, right? I mean, it's just the Cantillon effect. If we allowed it to fail, then we wouldn't have it, right? Those guys wouldn't be up there. Our lives would have gone back to normal at some point, right? Especially if we were manufacturers. If we were manufacturers of good stuff and we had crashed and let the rich fail, yeah, it would have sucked. It would have been hard. We would have had to like do a lot of shit for a while, but we would have made up for it in fairly certain times, I would imagine, and then we'd be back to being a manufacturer again. And if we were responsible with it, we would have been able to hold on to it. But the thing is you have to not go into the luxuries, because the moment that you start diving into luxuries, it's over. It's what it is, and you just can't help it, right? The moment that you start eating two steaks instead of one, it's the consumption that starts to take place. So you have to work real hard, earn all this stuff, and then just keep reinvesting it and just eat like only the meagerest portions of food and just not dive into any kind of luxuries or wealth or none of that stuff. Food, conveniences, pleasures of life, just cut that out, but then work damn hard and acquire as much as you can. And if you can maintain that, then you'll be good. But the moment that you would rather be like, no, I want 2 ribeyes. I want to drive new cars. I want to go on fancy vacations. I want, and it'll crash. And it'll take a while, it might take generations, who knows, it might take lifetime. What your grandpa needed to start a business, a shovel, what you need, a business license, bonded insurance, credentials, certifications with the permit, bribes to your local government. Okay. You don't need brick and mortar anymore. You can just do it online. If I was building picnic tables in that garage, right, and I started selling picnic tables out of that garage, and I was able to make $1,000 a month selling picnic tables out of that garage, and one day I was just like, I don't think I really want to make, all these picnic tables. I don't want to make like just a couple, a few less picnic tables. And the neighbor over there, he's building picnic tables, and instead I'm going to use my credit card in its place for the 2 picnic tables. Think about that happening. All right. That's what occurred, right? The picnic tables eventually went over to the neighbor's house and he builds them all. And now I use my credit card for my $1,000 a month. Right. It doesn't, there's no fiscal responsibility, anything that's going to fix this. It's not going to happen. That's, that's what's scary about the whole thing. Dimitri. Okay. Yeah. You could back the currency with fractional gold through just take away redemption rights. Well, then if you can't get the gold, then what's the point? Then is that like a false confidence? What would be the point of like partially backing it if you can't acquire it? That would be the whole point of backing the bond with it. You could do like say something like, you can get an equal amount in gold and never really actually acquire the gold, but then get like an ever increasing amount of dollars if the gold value was to go up. But to me, that seems very. It seems like it would only set itself up to lose confidence even more once it did. I mean, at least now with the U.S. Treasuries, it's just empty debt. It's empty promise to pay. I mean, everybody knows it is. And so, like, if you were to actually add a gold element to that, then you would be a liar too. I mean, well, you're already a liar, but I mean, they know it. I mean, everybody knows that that it's an empty promise to pay. But then if you also add like a gold element saying, hey, we're going to add like, even more promise to it, I mean, I don't know if that's really going to help. All right. The best neighbor is a fence, but know them and be part of the community. Yeah. Did you hear about the crypto coin that will put an end to inflation? It's not yet, but let's just say you heard it here first. All right. Networking and parallel economies. Yeah, totally. Todd, that was probably one of the like the key points about the weekend for the rebel capitalist was networking. And I mean, it was mentioned a lot, and as the breaks took place, everybody went out and shook hands and talked and swapped business cards. It was really quite the event, as far as like just literally within that networking idea. And I could see where a lot of people, especially with the excitement that they had going into this convention, that that parallel, like, because once you raise your vibration up, and you start getting into like more excited things, more positive things, you're around more positive people. People say like, well, positive things happen. Well, it's true, because what you end up doing is you're moving your vibration up into a positive level, and it's not just like some hokey like kind of magical things. What ends up happening is that your engagements with other people are more pleasant, right? So like when you're buying the coffee from the convenience store or whatever, if that's what you do, then like that little interaction, you will notice like everybody is like more engaged and pleasant to work with. Well, when that happens, it's the same thing when you go in to start doing business deals. Like you try to go do a business deal and you're on this low vibration, most likely you're not going to get it done. But if you have moved up into a positive, higher vibration, well, then you are going to get it done. So there's two different parallels taking place there, right? The one that you don't get the business deal and the one that you do. So you got to move yourself up to the one that you do. And even if you move yourself up and you realize you're not getting it, it's because that's the parallel that's waiting, or it's putting you into the path that is going to get you to the deal that you do want, so long as you keep that vibration up, which is a matter of like, making sure that you're, focused in on not on less expectations and more centered into the idea of like, understanding what it is that is being more authentic to the decisions that you are making, and not making decisions just because people out there in the world expect you to, right? That's a major thing. You got to really think for yourself on things, and not like, oh God, what is the world going to think if I do this, right? And that's not how it goes down. You gotta be like, this is the way I feel, this is the way I'm going for it, and that's what you do, and then better things happen for it. Idaho seems nice. Yeah, this part of Oregon wants to bust off and go be part of Idaho. All right. What does that say? Like, it'd be CBDC, but the underlying asset that the Treasury would tokenize would be Fort Knox, which would be operated to corner the global gold market. Okay, no, you can't. Okay, because the moment that you are buying goods, like how do you promise gold, not deliver it, right? And then import all their manufactured goods. It was like, hey, you got manufactured goods over there? Cool. We want manufactured goods. Because we're consumers, right? Like we're a consumer society right here. So we'll buy it, but we got this gold thing, but we're not really gonna give it to you. Right? Because if we did, it would all be gone. Because we would export all our gold in exchange for all their manufactured goods. It would disappear. We cannot go back to a gold standard. I mean, it just there's no way, because I mean, if you had a trade balance and you traded gold one for one, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna, even if you want to imbalance a little bit and you were able to go this positive a little bit, but you had, for the most part, you could balance that out. Cool, yeah, okay, I'd say let's go back to a gold standard. We could do that. But I don't see where that's happening, right? I mean, we have a major trade imbalance. We export our U.S. treasuries. That is our export. Okay. If you guys don't mind me asking, how did is everyone here? How, Jesus, I need my glasses. I could tell you what the demographics of the channel from the analytics page says that the majority of the channel is weird. It's actually dropped a little bit. Used to be 45 to, well, it was like around 45 was the average, and that's dropped now down into like the 30s. So which I found kind of interesting. That's happened over the last year or two. So I guess a lot more younger people are trying to figure out what's going on. That would make sense too, because like younger generations really aren't that encouraged to even care about economics until it begins to be painful, where the older generation has felt pain from the economics and therefore they would always, well, not always, but be more prevalent in that. So that makes sense. Like as things happen, then more young people would start looking into it. Uh, People in the country look out for each other. Yeah, people in the country do look out for each other. Out in the further you get away from the city, the more people, but then it's because you know each other. And that's why you're more likely to help them. It's because you're more likely to help somebody you know than not know, right? Yeah. Uh, Software America's hidden manufacturing advantage. I, I mean, is that what we're gonna like? Can you imagine trading software for every necessity of life? Like you can sit here and it's just like, man, I got all these software programs, like I got these computer programs, and I got all this stuff that I can build and all that other stuff. And I mean, I guess if you were building a bunch of robots, maybe if we built robots to do things for us, then which I guess they are doing, but even then, like then at that point, I was just like, there's really no use for us at all, like, and we would probably just eliminate ourselves, which I guess we kind of are doing. I mean, you think about depopulation, so huh. So yeah, AI will depopulate the world just all on its own because we'll do it to ourselves, since we'll be so indulged in luxuries. The idea of having kids just won't even be there, and then we'll grow old and die. Hmm. Wonder what the robots will do. You'll be bored, huh? Won't have anybody to serve anymore. All right, a lot of manufacturing is going to Mexico. Yeah, and that's what I was saying. It's just like, a lot of this is going to end up in Mexico, and it'll probably be cool for a while, right? As it takes place. But eventually, places like Vietnam and all these other ones are going to get cheaper shipping, and that cheaper shipping, like the cheaper transportation, is going to compete with the closer manufacturing from Mexico, and then the Mexican manufacturing will eventually fail because it's cheaper in other places of the world. But it doesn't mean that the Mexican manufacturing part won't do well while it's there during that time. I mean, it will do okay, but unless it continuously is like a manufacturing state where it exports more than it imports, that's how you end up creating the wealth and the standard of living increases by exporting more than you import, and really like trying to compete with China and then trying to compete with Vietnam and all these other places who are going to be like, well, I keep saying Vietnam, and the only reason why is because I've been reading some articles on it, so I kind of have to get my head out of that. Um, but that's really how it goes down. And so even if you have like these push, you got like, you can even get political leaders together and say, hey, we're going to do all this stuff. It doesn't change the economic force that's behind it. It's the industriousness of the people themselves and what they do. Like literally what we do as an individual. We are the economy, the decisions that we make and the businesses that we start and the savings that we do. We are it. And when you have the situation in which that we were producers, like each and every one of us was producing stuff and exporting it, that's the difference inside of it. Like, how many software people can be like export their services, right? I mean, how many people can exist in the United States that way? It's like, to me, I think about that. It's just like that isn't really like a concept to me. I mean, I guess it could be, but I don't see it. Like I don't recognize that as going to be the force that changes Cantillon's effect. Invest in antidepressants. Liquor. I'm into liquor. Arms. I haven't gotten any. I haven't gotten any. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not aggressive in that fashion. Like I'm a pacifist when it comes to war and stuff like that. Like I am not somebody who is going to be like I'm not into war, right? So I don't like the idea of investing in arms. I would invest in bullets, like personally. Like I'm big into defense. Like I am all about like being a defender, right? But as far as like trying to get into like, arms and stuff like that, I don't know, especially military stuff. It just, I mean, I probably should because it doesn't really matter what you invest in because somebody's going to do it. And whether you feel good about the decision or not by what you have invested in, I guess is really like, the moral issue that you have to deal with on your own. But, I don't know. What else you got there? Arms manufacturers. Okay. Pet companies, cosmetics, and garden supply stores. The Hysteria portfolio by Future Core Holdings. Huh, cool. More manufacturing jobs in U.S. is better. Well, yeah, of course it would be better, but it isn't going to happen. Not without force. Like, well, it's just like, well, people say free market is good, but you're going to force manufacturing back here so we don't have a free market so that we can have manufacturing here and that's going to be a good thing. Like, to me, that isn't good. I mean, if it was a free market and it was manufactured here, that would be a good thing, right? That would be a good thing. But to force manufacturing here and say, hey, we're going to tax all our citizens and we're going to charge a bunch of tariffs on other, imported goods on so that we can have manufacturing jobs and then tell people, hey, buy our stuff. Well, why would they be like, why am I going to buy your stuff? You got sanctions and tariffs and all kinds of stuff, you big fat cow. Why don't you buy our stuff and issue out some more debt? That's what they want us to do. Is silver goodbye? Yeah, actually, absolutely, silver's a good buy. I mean, you think about it, silver's at like what, 25, $26 an ounce? It's 50% of its all-time high. There's really nothing out, well, maybe oil. Oil is at 50% of its all-time high. But there's hardly anything out there that's at 50% of its all-time high. So if you're into commodities or buying commodities, that's like, I mean, very little downside risk coming from silver. Now, can it go down to 13? Yeah, I've seen it. I mean, I bought it at $40 an ounce when we were trying to crash JP Morgan buy silver campaign. But, eventually eventually I dollar cost average back into it. So I don't even know where my average is. I just buy a little bit all the time. And well, not all the time, but I buy a little bit I try to do it on a regular basis. What my life needs is more people in cars. Everything in moderation, including moderation. All right. I'm going to give it like 5 more minutes here, guys, and then I'm going to head and go get something to eat. All right, let me get down here on the ground. Down here on the ground. Down here to the bottom here. All right. Don't think of it from amount, but from percentages. Each region is different. That carries everything not interested. Okay. Connect Russia to Alaska with a bridge tunnel, and we won't need so many ships. Trains are the most efficient way to move freight. Actually, I think ships are the most efficient way, isn't it? I mean, I'm pretty sure water is by far the most efficient. Isn't your food ready? Yes, it is. It is. I'm waiting for this to go to 110 and then I'll. Okay. Anybody checking out Eric Doobie? Stock up on booze and food, sell that when the depression comes. What do you eat when food is gone? Nothing. You don't. That's the problem, right? That's why I like living in the Pacific Northwest. This is a very abundant area. I mean, of course, like, if everybody decides that they're going to go out deer hunting, they're gone, right? There's no more deer left. And, again, like, there's the place is only so sustainable from the ground itself, like from the land. But there's a lot here. Like, this is a very abundant state, like especially up in the Pacific Northwest where I'm at. This is a very abundant food source from just naturally being here. Um, aggressive protectionism. I would focus on gold over silver. Some Japanese monks have survived on a diet of tree bark and pine needle tea for over 3 years. Holy crap. Who the hell would want to do that? Oh my God. No, 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 there ain't no American gonna do that. I can tell you that, man. There ain't. I mean, there might be one or two of them out there who can pull that off, but everybody's gonna die. If they're eating tree bark and drinking pine needle tea. We're going to go keto when all the food's gone. Boots on the ground report. A businessman, longtime resident of China, big money guy, says conditions in China deteriorating is likely going economy class compared to first class now. Yeah, and there's nothing like China needs to issue out debt. Like if they want to keep their new money coming in and keep their standard of living increased, they're going to have to keep issuing out debt. And that's the problem. Is just like, who wants to buy Chinese debt? I mean, you want to buy like Chinese bonds? Like, hey, China's going to pay on these things? I mean, here's the thing. We're about ready to run into a debt ceiling. And when I was talking with Lynn Alden, actually, it was George Gammon and Lynn Alden were having an intense conversation last night. This is okay. So they had like this after hours party that we went to, and it was really cool. It was like just like you see in the movies, kind of stuff. Anyway, so I'm listening in on George Gammon and Lynn talk about money creation, and I tell you, the two of them had this conversation. It started off at this party, and then it carried all the way back over to the hotel, and then we stood out in front of the hotel for like another 40 minutes. I kid you not. It was so funny. This is like, I should tell you guys. Okay, so anyway, it was Mike Maloney who actually started the conversation, right? Because it's the party for all the speakers and everything else, and it's like us VIP guests got to attend this, right? And so it was Mike Maloney who started this question about this money creation and like this possible of these doppelganger dollars that he was calling it, and it's like this two-part thing. Anyway, he had this idea that he had thrown out there, and Lynn was like kind of giving him the answer on the question, and then George came into the equation or into the conversation and started adding to into this equation or whatever. And then we had to leave this restaurant, right? So this conversation had gone on for like maybe like 20 minutes or so. We go to the restaurant, and I get back to the hotel, and they're standing out front, both George, Lynn, and Mike, right? Mike Maloney, and they're all standing in front of the hotel, and they're carrying on with this conversation, right? So I just joined, like I didn't join in. I don't have anything to add. These guys are just like high level, so I'm just trying to absorb it all. So I'm just quietly listening and trying to hear because it's kind of noisy and I don't hear very well. So I'm like kind of leaning in and I'm listening. And I kid you not, they talk out there for a while. Mike actually goes in and grabs a beer, comes out, and stands out there in the front of the hotel while they continue on with this conversation and drinks that beer. But I don't know where I was going with this. It was something about, I don't know, something that had to do with interest rates. Oh, that's what it was. Okay, so they talked about the debt default, right? So if possible debt defaulting and what that would look like, and what the Fed could do in order to like not default but default. And here's something that was very interesting to think about. And I think I brought it up. I'm pretty sure because I had thought about this too when she mentioned it. But then she said something else that I had kind of forgotten about, but had been suspicious of because people have said it before. But then when Lynn said it, it like really kind of confirmed it. So the first thing, okay, so they start to default. What are they going to default on? It's going to be the short-term treasuries, right? The ones, or not necessarily short-term treasuries, but they start to default on some treasuries, right? And so some of these treasuries that are defaulting, what the Fed can do is say, hey, if those things are not paying, give us those toxic ones and we'll give you ones that are not toxic. So that the people themselves are now like the Federal Reserve is now holding the toxic treasuries, but the good ones are still out there, and just keep that system going where they buy toxic treasuries during this defaulting thing that's happening, right? So this is one of the possibilities. Or they can default on just like particular ones, like the ones that China holds. You see? I thought that was a pretty interesting take on it, on how they can handle what would happen if a debt ceiling did get breached and default started to take place. how it is that some of these, because they're going to deplete some of the extraordinary measures first. They'll get rid of, like, they'll start cutting, military government and all kinds of stuff, but eventually they'll get to a point where the defaults will start to take place. And that's something that they could do, is like the Federal Reserve could literally like take the toxic assets, the toxic treasuries away from the bank's balance sheets or the people's, possession or whatever, and hand them good ones that are still paying, and just keep that system going for who knows how long. And it would be like a non-default default, since like everything that's out there in the market would be good, would not be defaulting bonds. Only the Fed would hold defaulting bonds. And then eventually, I guess, like with the idea that they would pay or get paid back, because I don't know what would happen if they didn't, because that would leave liabilities out there, and then that opens up a whole nother can of worms. I gotta go eat. All right, uneducated economist, you let me know.